Okay, so today let's kind of dive into something that I think we all deal with at some point or another, at least in, romantic relationships anyway, and that is relationship anxiety.
Yeah.
You know, that feeling, right?
Right.
It can even happen in really, really good, strong
Oh,
relationships.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's so common. Even in really solid partnerships, you can still have these feelings pop up.
Mm,
And, it's important to distinguish. It's not just about like those first date jitters,
right.
right? Everyone gets those.
Right.
We're talking about something a little deeper.
Totally. Yeah. Like those first date jitters are totally normal, but we're talking about that feeling of like there's this persistent worry, this nervousness, this like underlying, I don't know, anxiety almost.
Yeah.
The Calm blog article we're looking at today talks about that.
It's like those butterflies you're talking about, but they just never fly away, you know?
Right.
They just kind of like take up residence and they turn into this kind of constant state of stress. And I think that's a good way to differentiate it, right? Between the normal kind of relationship jitters and something that's a little bit more serious and might actually be impacting your well-being.
That's such a good visual, like those butterflies just like setting up shop and being like, we live here now.
Exactly.
Oh, no. So, how do you even know, though, if what you are feeling is relationship anxiety, like full blown? Like, are there certain signs or like red flags to look out for?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely things to watch out for. One of the big ones, and Choosing Therapy talks about this too, is this need for constant reassurance from your partner.
Yeah.
And it's one thing, I think, to check in with your partner and want to feel that closeness. But when you're constantly needing that validation, like way more than just kind of a normal check-in,
Hmm.
that can be a sign that there's something a little bit deeper going on.
Yeah.
And trust me, it can be really, really draining on both partners in a
Oh,
relationship.
totally. It's almost like you get stuck in this cycle of needing proof, essentially, that your partner cares, even when they are showing you in so many different ways.
Right.
And that can be really exhausting for both people. Like you said, you start doubting your partner's feelings all the time, even when they're being, loving and affectionate, which is it's just a hard place to be.
Absolutely. And sometimes this can
Yeah.
even lead to, people pleasing to an unhealthy degree,
Yeah.
where you're so worried about, rocking the boat that you're putting your needs, I mean, completely secondary to your partner's. You're putting their needs first all the time, which can be, detrimental to the relationship as well.
It's like you're constantly walking on eggshells.
Yeah.
Like you're always worried about saying or doing the wrong thing. And then on top of all of that, then you get into, overanalyzing every little thing.
Yeah.
Like, have you ever caught yourself doing that where you're just like analyzing every word, every action, like looking for these hidden meanings that are probably not even there?
Oh, for sure.
It's exhausting.
It is. And I think that actually leads really well into the next thing, which is like, what's causing this?
Yeah.
Where is this coming from? Because that's a huge piece of this, right?
Yeah.
Understanding why we feel this way is such a big part of feeling empowered to actually change it.
Totally. Like, what is at the root of all of this? So, like, where does relationship anxiety even come from?
Well, one thing that Very Well Mind talks about is attachment styles.
Yeah.
And essentially, these are kind of like patterns that are often formed in early childhood. And they can really influence how we approach relationships later in life, romantic relationships especially. Like, let's say someone grew up with parents who were emotionally unavailable or maybe even just kind of inconsistent with their caregiving. Maybe they were hot and cold.
Right.
That can lead to something called an anxious attachment style.
Right.
And that can absolutely make someone more prone to relationship anxiety, later down the road.
It's like you're saying our past experiences can really shape how we relate to others romantically, even years and years later.
Absolutely. And it's not even just our childhoods. They could be past relationships too,
Yeah.
especially those that were unhealthy in some way. Like, remember that section in the Choosing Therapy article where they list out those unhealthy partner
Oh,
behaviors?
yeah. The one where you're reading it, you're like, wait, that happened to me.
Yeah,
Maybe that's why I feel this way.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Things like if a partner was constantly checking your phone, reading your messages, just not respecting your boundaries, making you feel guilty for wanting to spend time with your friends, putting down your hobbies, your interests, like all of those behaviors, they really do chip away at your self-esteem.
Yeah.
And they can, unfortunately, create this kind of fertile ground for anxiety to grow in your future relationships.
Yeah, it's like you're almost carrying baggage from those old relationships into the new one without even realizing it.
Totally, yeah. And it could be, totally subconscious.
Yeah.
And it's also important to remember there are other factors that can play into this too,
Yeah.
right? It's not always just about our past. Sometimes it's, if someone already struggles with an anxiety disorder in general,
Right.
that can definitely spill over into relationships and make it harder to kind of navigate those normal ups and downs that everyone experiences without having those anxious feelings kind of take over.
Yeah.
Or even just, struggling with self-esteem or having a hard time communicating your needs. All of those things can contribute too.
For sure. It's like you're trying to learn this new dance, but you're already starting off feeling unbalanced. So, okay, with all of that being said, with all these potential triggers, how do we even begin to take control of this?
Right.
How do we actually create healthier, more fulfilling relationships when this is like constantly in the back of our minds?
Well, I think choosing therapy really nailed it when they said it starts with understanding.
Okay.
Once you actually figure out, okay, this is what's fueling my anxiety, these are the underlying causes, that's when you can actually start to challenge those negative thought patterns and develop those healthier coping mechanisms.
It's like having that aha moment
Yes,
where it all kind of clicks into place.
exactly.
But I mean, even when you have all of that knowledge, right? Even when you figure out those root causes, actually putting it into practice, that's the harder part. What are some actual things that people listening can do right now to start to manage that relationship anxiety? Like, what are some strategies?
Yeah, and I think one of the best places to start, honestly, is with good old-fashioned open and honest communication.
Hmm.
And that goes for your communication with your partner, but also just with, anyone you trust, friends, family, a therapist. Very well. Might really emphasize that. Like, honesty, even when it's uncomfortable, it's so important because if you keep bottling everything up inside, it just makes that anxiety so much worse.
It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater, you know?
Exactly.
Sure,
Eventually, it's
like-
going to pop back up. Exactly. And usually at the worst possible time.
Yeah.
And then when those anxious thoughts do inevitably pop up, that's where that active listening comes in and, really trying to stay present. Because I don't know about you, but when I'm feeling anxious, my mind automatically wants to go to like worst case scenario.
Oh, 100%.
It's like jumping to conclusions.
Yeah.
And active listening can really help with that because it helps you stay more grounded.
Okay, so I love that, but what did that actually look like, active listening?
Yeah. So it's really about being present in the conversation, actually paying attention to what your partner is saying instead of letting your mind race ahead and, plan out your response or overthink what they're saying. It could be something as simple as asking clarifying questions, really making eye contact, putting your phone away, like those little gestures that really show you're engaged.
Yeah, like creating that space where your partner feels heard, which can hopefully in turn help calm your own anxiety because you feel like you're on the same page.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And, for those moments when, that anxiety does start to bubble up, it can be helpful to have like a toolbox full of self-soothing techniques.
Oh, I like that. Like a mental first aid kit for
Exactly.
when things start to feel overwhelming.
Exactly.
So what would you put in your first aid kit? What are your go-to self-soothing techniques?
Well, both. Very Well Mind and Calm talked about this, and they really emphasize the power of some of those simple practices, like deep breathing exercises,
Right.
mindfulness or meditation, even just intentionally engaging your senses.
Engaging your senses.
Yeah, like think about what helps you feel grounded and calm. Like, is it listening to a favorite song? Is it going for a walk in nature and really like paying attention to the sights and sounds?
Yeah.
Or even just focusing on the feeling of your feet on the ground, things like that.
It's like you're giving your mind something else to focus on that's positive and calming instead of getting stuck in those thought loops.
Exactly. It's about interrupting those racing thoughts,
Yeah.
and bringing yourself back to the present moment. Because when you're present, all those what ifs and worries, they tend to lose a little bit of their power.
Yeah, it's like hitting the reset button on your mind and your body.
Yeah.
Those are all fantastic, and I love how, like, actionable and practical they are,
Sure.
But what about those times when, even when you have, like, all the tools, all the strategies, you're doing the work, and you still just feel like that relationship anxiety is so strong?
Yeah.
It can be really discouraging, to feel like you're doing everything right and still just kind of struggling.
Absolutely. And,
Yeah.
and it's not always easy.
Right.
And I think that's where it's so important to remember that you don't have to go through this alone. Like all three of the resources that we're talking about today,
Yeah.
they all touched on this idea of, seeking professional help
Yeah.
and how valuable that can be.
It's that reminder that asking for help is not weak. It's actually a really strong thing to do.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you just need a little extra support to kind of work through some of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And a therapist can be such a valuable ally for that because they can provide that safe, non-judgmental space
Right.
to really dive into some of those deeper roots of your anxiety,
Yeah.
whether it's, attachment issues or past traumas, or even just those really deep-seated negative thought patterns.
It's like having a guide to help you navigate this really complex map.
Ooh, I love that analogy.
You know,
Yeah.
someone who can help you make sense of your own personal journey.
And help you develop those, personalized coping strategies that really work for you because it's not one size fits all.
Right. Exactly.
So, the things we talked about, those are great, but sometimes you need to go a little deeper,
Yeah,
and the therapist can help you do that.
for sure. So as we kind of wrap up our deep dive here on relationship anxiety, if any of this resonated with you, if you're listening to this and you're realizing, man, this is something that I'm really grappling with. First
Mhm.
of all, you're not alone.
Not at all.
And second of all, if this conversation has kind of sparked something in you, if you feel like this is the little nudge that you needed to maybe reach out for some extra support, do it.
Yeah.
What if this is that first step towards creating a healthier, happier you?
It takes courage to reach out, but it's often like the most important step you can take
So well said.
on that journey.
Yeah, and remember, like, understanding relationship anxiety, it's a journey.
Yeah.
It's not about, arriving at some perfect destination. It's
Right.
about learning and growing along the way. So
Exactly.
be kind to yourself.
Yes.
Take it one step at a time
One day at a time.
and know that that support is always there when you need it.
It is.
This has been really great.
This was fun. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for all of your insights.